Hello there! If you'll recall from last episode, Zendikar is in a pretty bad spot right now. The monstrous eldritch beings called the Eldrazi are devouring the plane, and one of the plane's last protectors, Soren Markov, has failed in binding them, and thus has abandoned the plane altogether. At this point in time, several months to a year after their initial release, only the Titan Ulamog is known to remain on the plane, wreaking havoc. The whereabouts of the Titans Kozilek and Emrakul are unknown. The only hope left for Zendikar lies in the planeswalkers Gideon and Nissa, and what they will do to try to combat this Eldrazi menace. Starting with Gideon, he had two particular people in mind to help, Chandra Nalaar and Jace Beleren, both of whom had to do with the release of the Eldrazi Titans in the first place. Gideon was unable to secure Chandra's help after visiting her on the plane of Regatha, but Jace Beleren agreed to help out, reluctantly anyway. Jace just so happens to be what's known as the Living Guild Pact on Ravnica, essentially the law of the plane itself. He had many duties to attend to, but he relented when Gideon made it clear just how serious the threat they were facing was. Liliana Vess, another planeswalker who was visiting Jace at the time, refused to come along, and was in fact quite offended that Jace would choose saving countless lives over spending time with her. So, Gideon managed to get Jace at the very least, just after the city of Seagate, the last bastion of hope on Zendikar, had fallen to the Eldrazi, taking all of its scholars and archives with it. Jace was a telepath, a mind mage, and a very intelligent one at that, so Gideon figured he might be able to solve the puzzle of the Hedron ley lines and reseal Ulamog and his brood, even without help from the Fallen of Seagate. After setting up camp with some of the survivors of Seagate, including one scholar named Jory N, they met up with Nissa Ravane, the elf planeswalker, who was distraught because her innate connection to the plane of Zendikar, which powered her magic, had been severed. She was going to search for a way to connect herself to the plane once more, while Gideon would seek out other allies and Jace would study the Hedron networks and how they functioned. They agreed to meet up at the ruins of Seagate once their separate quests had ended. Starting with Jace, he figured the best place to start would be at the Eye of Ugin itself, where he had inadvertently loosened the Eldrazi's bonds before. And who should he find there other than the spirit dragon himself, Ugin. You see, the reason Ugin never responded to Nahiri's first call for help was that he had actually been killed in a fight against Nicol Bolas. It's a long story, but the short of it is that the planeswalker Sarkhan Vol, once a pawn of Bolas, had been called to Tarkir, the plane where Ugin had died, by the spirit of the spirit dragon. Don't ask me how that works. He, using a temporal gateway, went back in time and prevented Ugin from dying by surrounding his dying corpse with a Hedron cocoon, using a chunk of Hedron he had brought from Zendikar. Only now, after the full release of the Eldrazi, had Ugin been freed from said cocoon, and returned to the Eye of Ugin to try to seal the Eldrazi in the absence of Nahiri, and now Soren. Ugin explained to Jace how the Hedrons were used to bind the Eldrazi, and Jace realized that the same tactics could be used to immobilize Ugin and his brood, rather than seal them away, which would be the first step in killing them. Ugin warned Jace that killing the Eldrazi Titans could have dire consequences, but Jace ignored these warnings, and returned to Seagate with his new knowledge. Nissa, meanwhile, sought after the Khalni Heart, a sort of growth of the soul of Zendikar, believing that this piece of the plane's soul could reattune her to the plane. Guided by visions, she found the heart, but found with it a little problem. You see, eons ago, back when Nahiri was still guarding the plane, a human planeswalker named Nixilis, a user of demonic magic, had arrived on Zendikar, intent on conquering the entire plane. Nahiri put a stop to that real quick by implanting Hedrons into Nixilis' back, both trapping him in his demonic form while simultaneously destroying his wings and his planeswalker spark. So he was stuck on Zendikar, and yet was powerless to conquer it. But thousands of years later, amid the Eldrazi crisis, the Khalni Heart formed, and Nixilis believed that absorbing the soul of the plane would reignite his spark, allowing him to escape from Zendikar. At this point, most of his power had come back to him, including his wings, so he just needed that last little push. When Nissa arrived at the Heart, she found Nixilis, but with the Heart's power, she became aflush with the elemental power of Zendikar, and was able to best Nixilis in combat, and collapsed a mountain of rock onto him, trapping him underground. She returned to Seagate with her powers restored, and her most powerful elemental, Ashaya, once more in tow. Gideon did as he planned, meanwhile, and sought out new allies. Of those who had not succumbed to the Eldrazi menace, he recruited the vampires of Zendikar, led by a vampire named Drana, the surviving humans of Seagate and the surrounding areas, led by General Tazri, and Noyan Dar, a merfolk elementalist called a Royal Shaper, who was able to control the unpredictability of Zendikar's landscape to his will. He also had the planeswalker Kiora and her merfolk followers, Elven Skyriders, the Core, Goblins, as much as goblins can help, and now Nissa's force of elementals. All was ready to fight to reclaim Seagate from the Eldrazi, which they did successfully. Their victory was short-lived, however, as soon the scholar Jory N returned from a scouting mission to report that Ulamog himself was headed directly towards Seagate. Gideon and his forces decided to stand and defend the city, just as Jace returned from his mission. Jace laid out a plan to trap Ulamog using the Hedrons that were scattered about the landscape. He and Nissa worked together to align the Hedrons while the rest of the troops kept off Ulamog's spawn. When all the Hedrons were aligned, Gideon lured Ulamog to the center of the Hedron ring, blocking the Eldrazi's crushing blows with his invincibility magic. The plan seemed to have worked flawlessly and Ulamog was trapped, but just then, Nixilis showed his ugly demon face. He had clawed his way out of the rubble that he had been buried under and followed Nissa to Seagate, and now, seeing this opportunity to regain his spark, knocked one of the Hedrons out of alignment, funneling the power of the Hedron ring into himself rather than into Ulamog. That burst of mana was just enough to reignite his spark. It was at that point that Chandra Nalaar decided to join the party, but she was too late to help stop Nixilis. Victory, however, still seemed attainable for Gideon's troops, but Nixilis knew a thing or two about powerful beings like the Eldrazi. Out of pure spite for what Nissa did to him, Nixilis beckoned Kozilek to rise from the earth where he had been slumbering. With 2 titans now roaming the plane instead of 1, and with double the spawn on their tails, things seemed grim, to say the least. Tune in next time, where we look at the story of Oath of the Gatewatch, and how exactly these planeswalkers have any hope of combating this second titan. Thank you so much for watching this video, I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, etc., things that YouTubers are supposed to say. And remember, tune in every Saturday for the next installments. See you next time.